I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We have a jam-packed show for you tonight. We'll ask the DMV director who's accountable for the problems with voter registration there. We'll also look at the claim from national Fox News that Janelle Bynum is under investigation. But we're starting tonight with another fact check on attack ads. Politics. It's our big story tonight. In our political ad fact check last week, we told you how the balance of power in Congress is really up for grabs this November. A lot of focus is on the U.S. House of Representatives, where Republicans hold just a real slim majority. If Democrats flip 4 seats from red to blue, assuming the rest stay the same, they would gain the House majority. Basically, Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats. And one of the more contentious races where Democrats hope to flip a seat is right here at home in Oregon's 5th Congressional District. Here's a look at the area. It starts out near the corner of southeast Portland and stretches all the way down through the eastern half of the Willamette Valley and then across the Cascades to Bend and Sisters. Right now it's represented by freshman incumbent Republican Lori Chavez-DeRemer. But she faces a big challenge from Democrat Janelle Bynum, a former state representative here in Oregon. It's worth noting that Bynum actually defeated Chavez-DeRemer twice, once in 2016, again in 2018, in order to win that Oregon State House seat. The well-respected Cook Report rates this third rematch a toss-up. This time, of course, it's for a seat in Washington, D.C., not in Salem. Another reason Democrats are really pushing for this district is because Joe Biden won the 5th district in Oregon by more than 8 percentage points back in 2020, so they think they've got a shot. And because this race is expected to be so close, the ads, of course, getting nasty with less than a month to go. So tonight we'll look at an ad attacking Janelle Bynum, and tomorrow we'll do the same for an ad against Lori Chavez-DeRemer. Ready? Good. Let's get started. The ad starts with a video which looks like it's from Portland. Not every street looks like this, but there are plenty that do.
You can't walk down the street without stepping over someone. This push to decriminalize from politicians like Janelle Bynum, that's why we're here. She pushed to decriminalize drugs like fentanyl.
Okay, some context here, please. Bynum did indeed vote for Measure 110, which decriminalized small amounts of hard drugs in Oregon. The Washington Examiner, cited in that ad, ran this headline last May. Democrats put faith in House candidate Bynum, but past support for decriminalizing fentanyl threatens chances. In their story, they linked to this Facebook post back in 2020 where Bynum says she is voting yes on Measure 110. She also writes, "I think we can get better legislation through the legislature. This was a very hard toss-up." Now, a lot of other people voted for it as well, more than 1.3 million Oregonians. That same article points out Measure 110 passed with 58% of the vote, and Multnomah County voted in favor of it at a rate of 3-1. It's worth noting that Bynum also voted for House Bill 4002, which recriminalized drugs, including fentanyl. Okay, back to the ad.
Worse than decriminalizing drugs, Janelle Bynum wrote the plan to release thousands of criminals from prison early.
You know, it's hard enough. You're gonna put hardened criminals back on the street.
All right, what about this one? Well, the ad cites the Oregonian newspaper from June 15, 2020. I found that article. Sure enough, Bynum was one of 4 lawmakers who lobbied Governor Kate Brown to let prisoners out early. Now, it's worth remembering this was during COVID. Bynum argued that the prisons were overly congested and could be a death sentence for people with severe medical problems, and that the appropriate humanitarian response would be to release them as soon as possible. According to the Oregon Justice Commission, by the way, while lawmakers wanted nearly 2,000 set free, Governor Brown did indeed release 963 adults in custody from July of 2020 through October of 2021. And of those, 34%, so that's 1 in 3, were arrested for a new crime within 2 years. And 20%, that's 1 in 5, were convicted of a new crime in 2 years. And 12% went all the way back to prison. Okay, so that claim is accurate. Bynum was indeed one of 4 lawmakers who pushed to get inmates released, although lots of other outside groups were calling for that as well.
This is Bynum putting her agenda ahead of our safety. We don't need Janelle Bynum in Washington.
Congressional Leadership Fund is responsible for the content of this advertising.
And that last part, well, that's just opinion, and apparently a chance to remind viewers that Portland still has a homeless problem. Yeah, we know. So what's going through your mind? Anything surprise you there? Are there any other ads in this race that you would like us to fact check? If so, let me know where you saw it and kind of the time that you saw it. Email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or you can always call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. And while we're on the topic, Janelle Bynum is firing back at Republicans tonight, accusing the campaign of Lori Chavez-DeRemer of planting a false story on Fox News nationally to distract voters. This goes back to something which happened allegedly during Bynum's campaign for the state legislature in 2022. The Capitol Chronicle reports the campaign manager for a rival of Bynum in the 2024 May primary filed a complaint based on information that she deemed credible that came from a, quote, informant. The stories involve alleged sexual assault and harassment by a 22-year-old man who was working for a Democratic group helping members get elected to the state legislature. The complaint was filed over the summer, but the national Fox News website ran a big story on it this past weekend. The headline shouts, "Willful cover-up, Democrat in key House race hit with ethics complaint that could derail campaign." Okay, so that's the allegation. Now, we looked into it and we found pretty much nothing there. First, it was a complaint to the legislature's equity office, not the ethics office. Second, an email from the director of that office that I reviewed clearly states that Bynum is not under investigation for the alleged incident. Third, I've also talked with Oregon State Police. They are investigating the allegation, but confirmed that Bynum is not the focus of that complaint. Today, the candidate said it's all about politics.
I think that this is also coming from Lori Chavez-DeRemer's campaign, where it's politically motivated. It's one of those things where it's a fake.
Well, we asked the DeRemer campaign about it. Here's what they had to say. A Democrat filed a complaint alleging Janelle Bynum failed to fulfill her legal duties as a mandatory reporter. Janelle Bynum then blamed others for her failures. Janelle Bynum needs to grow up and be accountable instead of pointing fingers. So there's that. Bynum says she did hear about something back then, but insists she did the right thing.
As a mom, I'm always really concerned when my kids or any young people are facing issues at work. And for me, in the campaign, I reported the information that I found, and I think it's really important for there to be accountability. So the employer is accountable for making sure that they handle issues.
Now, that employer she's referring to is the group called Future PAC. They're the ones who employed the 22-year-old to help Democratic candidates. So I got to say, unless more is released that reveals something that we don't know now, it does not appear the Bynum campaign will be derailed. Now, let's get to continuing problems with Oregon's voter registration system run through the Department of Motor Vehicles. They're involved because anytime someone gets a driver's license or ID or renews a driver's license, they're automatically registered to vote if they are a U.S. citizen. Now, last month, the DMV announced on September 13th, 6 weeks after a problem was discovered, that they'd run a check of their system and found 306 people who were automatically registered to vote in error. The DMV kept looking and announced on September 23rd that another 953 people were discovered. The system had automatically registered them to vote again in error. And then yesterday, the DMV announced that another batch had been found totaling 302 records, for a grand total so far of 1,561 people who were registered to vote in Oregon when they are not eligible to vote. So how did this happen? Well, the DMV explained that sometimes when a person went to DMV and used a foreign passport or birth certificate as proof of identity, a worker would accidentally note in the computer system that they had actually presented a U.S. passport or birth certificate. U.S. citizens can, of course, vote. So the system automatically took their name and registered them to vote. People with foreign passports are not U.S. citizens and cannot vote. Let's get some perspective here, by the way. At the end of September, Oregon had just over 3 million registered voters, and we're talking about 1,561 people registered in error. So yes, tiny, teeny-weeny percentage, but I also think it is a very worthwhile number when it comes to the integrity of our voting system and the confidence that we all have in that system. Now, I had a great chance today to interview the administrator of the DMV, that's Amy Joyce, and started off with a question right along those lines.
What's this been like with this continual drip, 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 and knowing that it's impacting some voters' confidence in our system?
Pat, I would, I would not describe it as a drip, drip, drip. The initial file of 300, I believe it was 306. We were transparent that that was not the end of it, that was the initial, and we were going to be continuing to do analysis. And so then the additional records came out, adding up to the 1,259 about, I think it was 10 days later. So in very quick order, based on an intensive work from the agency to review a lot of files. And then we believed at that point that was that we'd found what we were going to find. Unfortunately, and transparently, as we put in the after action report, we did have those two additional issues that came up that we was unfortunate, and we put those out. So that's where we are today. And I wouldn't describe it as a drip, but I understand why you're describing it that way.
Well, it's just that, yeah, as soon as we try and reassure people that, hey, they're on this and what you've seen is what you get, and from here on, it's great. And then there's another week and it's like, well, actually. So that's my explanation for calling it a drip.
Yeah, no, I understand. I was waiting. I couldn't tell if there was a question there. So, but I understand why you're saying it. Yeah.
Now, one of the new problems we learned about yesterday involves people who live in Oregon but are originally from American Samoa. Our friends at Willamette Week had asked the DMV if they were being registered as U.S. citizens, and the answer was yes. And that is a problem. They are actually U.S. nationals, which is different than citizens and does not carry the right to vote. But since 2016, DMV has been classifying people from American Samoa as citizens, so their information was sent to the automatic voter registration system as well. Administrator Joyce and I talked about that, too.
And how big is that issue going to be? Do you know how many people from American Samoa of voting age are in Oregon and how many have been given voter registration?
I don't have that demographic information, and I don't know how many have been given voter registration. Again, we were able to, we used what we could to try to locate folks who had an indication that they were from American Samoa, and that's how we located those records.
Okay, but it would not be surprising if the number grew.
I'll add that we recognize that we don't have a way to determine the entire universe. And so that's why there is going to need to be some additional communication with those communities to ensure that people are aware of their right to vote when they're U.S. citizens, and also that if they have been registered but are not U.S. citizens, that they should not cast that ballot. So we're going to continue to work on that, particularly with the Oregon Secretary of State Elections Division.
So that's kind of an interesting problem, don't you think? They don't know how many people are in Oregon who were born in Samoa, and they don't seem to know how to figure that out. It also turns out that for the most part, DMV does not keep scanned versions of the documents that someone uses to prove identification.
Do they scan in like whatever form of ID that I'm using and that's held? And that's how you've been able to check all these, is going back and checking the scanned ID that they presented and then what the computer says?
Yeah. So the answer to that is no, Pat. We identify this in the after action report as something that is, to our minds, somewhat problematic. So current law in Oregon is that when you get a real ID, right, which is the sort of travel ID under federal law, when you get a real ID, we are required to scan in your source document. So if you present us a U.S. passport, we scan that in, we have an image, we retain it in our system, okay? For a standard issuance, a non-real ID, we are prohibited from scanning in that information. So this is where we get into, I think there's a description in the after action report or when I testified before House rules, that what the staff do is they fill out a form that indicates what the person showed to them as their identity document. So they might write U.S. passport or, whatever the thing is onto this form. And then the form is what gets scanned into the system for a standard. Yeah.
But at least you have some sort of a record to compare to later. even though it's not the actual document.
Yeah, that's how the system's supposed to work.
Okay, so with me so far, Oregon has discovered more than 1,500 people who were accidentally registered to vote who should not be registered. The state has told county clerks, by the way, to remove those people from the voter rolls. I also wanted to ask about the big picture of how this all went undiscovered for so long. So I quoted findings from the state's after action report on the incident.
And then finally, just a question about accountability. The after action was a bit severe, saying frontline staff not adequately trained on the importance accuracy, also on why it's critical for reliability to get it right every time. DMV did not undertake a process of review or audit of records to determine if the process was working as intended. Who's accountable to that? And will anyone be held accountable because of that?
Yeah. So let me start by saying this. All of those things in the after action report are true. They're transparent, and I think they are forthright about what went wrong here. That isn't, we didn't soften anything in terms of what went wrong here. To me, this is a culture issue more, certainly that we have these mechanical issues that were done incorrectly, but this is an issue of culture, of ensuring that people understand the importance of this element of a DMV transaction. Our staff understand it and how critical it is to get that important. I think I, as the DMV administrator, I'm largely accountable for that, and I accept that and acknowledge it.
Amy, just one other question. You've been there since 2020. I think maybe a lot of the public would be wondering, why wasn't there any audit? Why didn't you guys look harder at this earlier?
Yeah. I joined as DMV administrator, and I think it was November of 2020. So I have been there ever since the start of, again, that 1/1/21 date, the driver licenses for all, that sort of changed how we did this process. Absolutely. I mean, in hindsight, absolutely, we should have been reviewing this, looking at it. We exist to serve Oregonians, and we have focused on customer service. We have focused on serving a whole lot of customers. But this is a place where the focus needed to be also on quality and accuracy. And in hindsight, absolutely, we should have been looking at this.
Was there just an assumption that it was such a good program that there was probably very little to find, even if you did do an audit?
I don't think there was an assumption, Pat. I'm just going to say, I think in hindsight, we should have done a review.
Okay, so there you go, a deep dive on the DMV voter registration issue. Now, what are your thoughts on this? Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, Portland City Councilors got an update from the county today regarding an ambitious homeless response plan, what the numbers show, and why one county commissioner called on the city to stop sending millions of dollars to the Joint Office of Homeless Services. We'll have that when The Story returns. This past summer, the city of Portland and Multnomah County agreed on an ambitious plan to address homelessness. It's aptly named the Homelessness Response Action Plan. Not bad. It's part of an agreement for the city to keep helping fund the Joint Office of Homeless Services with about $30 million a year. And that agreement gave the city an out, if you will, if city councilors did not think the county was trending in the right direction. Today, the county briefed the city on how it's all going. The Joint Office today said they think they've made pretty good progress. They've added 429 shelter beds, with 87 more that they're hoping to come online by the end of the year. They say as of today, they've sheltered or housed about 6,900 people, with a goal of sheltering 18,000 by the end of next year. They also touted a new shelter availability app that outreach workers can use to tell people which beds are available at any given time. They're also working on developing a written policy around how tents and tarps are distributed to people. That tent and tarp policy could certainly influence the future of the deal between the city and the county. But Commissioner Sharon Myron with the county says the city and the county don't really know what they're doing, and there's no clear path forward. She went on to say the county fails in its responsibility to provide services because it's gotten lost in bureaucracy, and that she's seen firsthand the conditions on the streets have gotten worse.
The city can stop the charade and allow us to move on with actual work helping people. The world won't end if the city pulls out of the agreement. Our world, the lives of people in our community, will in fact be better. This is not a destructive act. It's the only constructive, collaborative way forward. Staying with the IGA isn't collaboration, it is collusion. It is not helping, it's aiding and abetting. So I hope you will not play into the PR campaign that we've seen with these multiple slides that tell us really essentially nothing.
Okay, the IGA is the agreement between the city and the county. As for the city, Mayor Ted Wheeler said he wants the governments to keep working together because the county has access to resources the city does not.
The county has the transition into housing that we do not have. The county gets Medicaid reimbursements, the county gets SHS dollars. We don't have access to any of that. So when all the bullshit is put aside, the fact of the matter is we have to work together. We don't all hold all of the keys collectively. And if we want to solve this problem and acknowledge it's a holistic problem, then we have to work together to get it done.
The city now gets to decide if they want to keep the agreement with the county to keep funding the joint office. So far, it's not on the city council's agenda, so we don't know when it's going to happen. Keep it right here. We'll be right back right after this. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. For those of you hoping for part 2 of our series on youth crime in the Pacific Northwest, we just ran out of time tonight, but we'll work to bring that to you tomorrow. The good stuff's coming your way next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.